I've never really told this story in full, partly because it's painful, and partly because it still amazes me how far betrayal can push someone, even someone who never thought of himself as vengeful. It happened back in the early 2000s. I was married, living what most people would call a normal suburban life. 2 little kids, a 4-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, the kind who light up every dull evening, whose tiny hugs feel like the universe itself wrapping around your chest. My wife, let's call her Lisa, worked part-time, usually 3 days a week. And on the days she didn't work, she'd sometimes take the kids to see her parents, who lived about 90 minutes away. At least, that's what she told me. At first, it seemed sweet. The grandparents adored our kids, and the kids came home talking about grandma's cookies and playing in the yard. But after a while, something just felt off. The visits started happening more often, twice, sometimes 3 times a week. That was a lot, considering the long drive. And each time, she'd be gone for most of the day. I remember one night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight in my chest. That quiet fear. You tell yourself, don't be paranoid. Trust your spouse. But deep down, another voice whispers, what if you're right? It became impossible to shake. One morning, before I left for work, I bent down to tie my shoes in the garage. Right next to me was her car, and on impulse, I glanced at the odometer. I made a mental note of the number, then left. When I got home, I checked again. The difference startled me, and so it began, my small, private investigation. Every morning, before coffee, before anything, I checked the mileage. And every evening, when the house was quiet, I checked again. The numbers were clear. She was driving hundreds of extra miles every week, sometimes 350, for 100 more than the round trips to her parents' house would explain. Then one weekday evening, I came home early from work. The kids were in the living room, building something out of blocks. On the desk near the computer, half covered by a grocery receipt, sat a sticky note in her handwriting. AOL password. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. My hands were sweating. Part of me screamed, don't do it. Another part, the wounded, suspicious part, couldn't resist. I sat down, typed her username and password, and held my breath as her inbox opened. I'll never forget the feeling, like ice spreading through my chest. She had been emailing her college best friend, gossip, daily life, and buried within, talk about meeting Bob. That was his real first name, I later learned. Her high school boyfriend. They joked about how she still had it, how Bob's wife had gotten fat after kids. It wasn't love letters, it was worse. It was casual, almost bored talk about arranging afternoons together, laughing about their spouses being clueless. In that moment, I saw my marriage from the outside, and it made my stomach twist. I printed every email. Shaky hands, sweaty fingers, paper feeding through the printer like an executioner's rope. Then I hid them in an old tax folder in the basement. For a week, maybe 2, I walked around the house like a ghost. My mind was at war. I loved her, I hated her. I pitied her, I wanted to destroy her. Then I thought about my kids. My childhood had been ripped apart by cheating parents, screaming fights, late-night arguments that shook the walls. I promised myself, they won't go through that. But still, I had to know everything before making a move. A friend of mine from college, now a cop, gave me the number of Ron, an ex-detective turned private investigator. Ron was calm, gray-haired, with a quiet voice that made you trust him immediately. I gave him the emails, the dates, the odd mileage. Give me 2 weeks, he said. I'll find out what's really going on. Those 2 weeks were agony. Every time she left the house, my imagination tortured me. Where was she going? Who was she meeting? What lies was she telling the kids? 2 weeks later, Ron called me. I drove to his office, sat across from him as he opened a folder. Inside, photos, receipts, notes. My wife, Lisa, dropping the kids at her parents', then driving straight to meet Bob. Lunch at a chain restaurant. Then, always, the same motel. Cheap, out of the way, rented by the hour. Photos of them laughing, holding hands, walking into the room together. Time stamps on every photo. I felt my throat close up. My chest burned. I don't remember breathing. I'm sorry, Ron said quietly. But part of me was relieved. The truth was worse than my fears, but at least it was the truth. Ron had dug deeper. Bob was married, 3 kids. VP of sales at a business owned by his father-in-law. The house he lived in, also owned by his wife's family. From the outside, perfect suburban life. But inside, rotten. I stared at Bob's photo, smug, smiling, clueless. And I felt something cold harden inside me. I couldn't let my kids' lives become the battlefield for my anger. But Bob had chosen this. Bob had helped destroy my marriage, my trust, my family's peace. And Lisa, she had betrayed us all. I didn't want shouting matches or messy custody fights. I wanted clean, silent, unstoppable consequences. Step 1. Hire a divorce attorney. Quietly. Carefully. Step 2. Ask Ron to make extra copies of the report. Step 3. Find the perfect moment. I had the divorce papers drawn up, listing irreconcilable differences. In our state, infidelity wouldn't get me the house or full custody, but that wasn't the point anymore. I also asked Ron to do me one last favor. Find Bob's wife. Show her everything. Ron didn't hesitate. On a Wednesday afternoon, while Lisa was at work, she was served the divorce papers, in front of her co-workers. At almost the exact same time, Ron knocked on a door across town. Bob's wife answered. Ron introduced himself, handed her the folder. Photos, receipts, emails. Ron told me later, her face changed from confusion, to horror, to heartbreak, and finally to anger. She thanked him, closed the door. In the days that followed, everything unraveled. Bob's wife emptied their joint bank account, took the kids, and filed for divorce. Her father, Bob's boss, fired him on the spot. No negotiation. No warning. Since the house belonged to her family, Bob was evicted within weeks. Bob didn't go quietly. He showed up at the house, yelling, demanding to see his kids. His wife's brother stepped in. Bob lunged at him. A fistfight. Bob ended up with a broken nose. Police reports were filed. Restraining orders followed. Bob faced criminal charges, and even some brief jail time. From family man to disgraced, unemployed, homeless, and divorced, all in months. Lisa was stunned at first. Then angry. Then defeated. In court, the infidelity didn't give me more custody, but it made her look dishonest. We finalized quietly, agreeing to joint custody. I refused to fight in front of the kids. I spoke to her only about drop-offs and holidays. The kids grew up. Now they're adults. Lisa and I don't speak unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't hate her anymore. I don't love her, either. She's just the mother of my children. Last I heard, Bob left the state. His ex-wife did well. She worked for her father, eventually took over the company. I searched online once. Nothing. No Facebook, no LinkedIn. Just vanished. Sometimes, late at night, I ask myself, was it cruel? But then I remember, I didn't lie. I didn't cheat. I didn't throw the first punch. I just revealed the truth, and let it do its work. I regret the pain my kids felt. Divorce hurts children no matter how quiet you keep it. But I don't regret making sure Bob faced consequences. Cheating isn't a mistake. It's a choice, again and again. And Bob chose it. Betrayal can break you, but truth can free you. You don't always have to scream. Sometimes, the quietest revenge is the most complete.